Welcome, everybody, to the show. Joining us is our regular co-host and fellow traveler, Dan, the Dan Noodles Man, the Bill Bruford of Wargaming.
I like that.
Yeah, I figured you would. That's why I said, because I just spent the last 15 minutes yelling at you, so I figured I would give you a compliment.
7 inches on top of me.
So, that's true. And joining us is our very special guest today, Mr. Brent Guillory from the Armchair Dragoons, and we're going to talk about some of this stuff. I don't want to do like just a dry recap of stuff that happened at Origins. I just kind of want the big picture of what the Wargames HQ did and how it fits into the greater strategy of Wargaming at Origins and how do we promote it.
Cute that you think there's a strategy for Wargaming at Origins.
But we have a strategy. I mean, pretty clear there's no strategy being discussed in the hallowed halls of Gamma. We've no doubt about that.
Fair. We do, in fact, have something resembling a strategy. Look, there's three things that we focus on when we're there. There's three key pillars that we try to stick with. And one of them is we want a mutually supporting group of folks working in the wargaming world. And to that end, like GMT doesn't have a booth there. They're represented by Enterprise. And they did send Jason Carr this year, which was great. I think Jason had a good time, had got some meaningful feedback on what they can do in the future. And we're hoping we get some additional GMT people there, not trying to get GMT in some giant booth in there. They've got
that's covered as far as I'm concerned. Their current arrangement works just fine. As far as coverage in the dealer room.
But GMT always supports us with, a giant stack of stuff for the raffle that we do for the giveaways there. They always help promote the stuff we're doing. And so we want to prioritize GMT games on tables. When we have other folks that are providing stuff for us to provide to the players, whether it's, some games to use for demo purposes or whether it's stuff for the raffle or whatever, we want to support those organizations as well. GMT this year, we wanted to prioritize their games on tables. And so this year we had Nevsky, Normandy 44, Space Empires 4X, Empire of the Sun, Distant Plain, Twilight Struggle, Red Sea.
Jesus.
I'm missing something.
You would have got the Battle for Normandy if the new one had been out by Origins. I'll just point that out.
But that's great. I mean, GMT really...
And every one of those except the Distant Plain ran multiple times. ADP, we just did the one big 8-player game, but all the rest of them ran multiple times. Now, that wasn't all that we had, but that was the GMT stuff that we had. That we had on tables. I think I got them all. I don't think I missed any.
You got Space Empires. So
Yep. And in the past, we've had a ton of different GMT games over the years. Like you can go back through the photo galleries we've gotten to see what.
I don't have to do that, Brant. I've run some of them.
Yes.
So,
but the with the support GMT provides us, we want to make sure that we prioritize getting GMT games in front of people. And when folks play them and have a good time, hey, Enterprise Games is at this booth. Here's where you can pick them up, or in some cases we will walk them over there because we're headed that way anyway. And so that's one of the three things that we really kind of want to focus on. Second Brent, one of those,
Brent, they're basically sponsoring you.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's not like a formal sponsor relationship, but it's one of those mutually supporting things. And it's not like GMT is an exclusive supporter of that. We've had plenty of stuff donated over the years from all sorts of different companies. Some at Origins, some not at Origins. I mean, Dan Verson in the past has sent us a couple of pretty big boxes of stuff to give away. I think we just keep forgetting to ask him again more than anything else. But we've had a variety of stuff over the years that other vendors have provided for us to throw into the raffle or other giveaways for the players there. One of the other things we want to focus on is we want to leverage the fact that we're at a convention and we've got a little bit of infrastructure. We've got big tables to work with. We've got large player counts to work with. And so we want to try and get some cool big things in front of people that are productions that are bigger than you're going to pull off at your local game store, right? They're bigger, they're snazzier, fancier things than you're going to get out of, your weekly game night with your buddies. And so that's where...
Like what, man?
Like Case Blue, Brant, I need 11 tables for next year.
So the last couple
I hope
of
you
years
could accommodate that.
The big monster game that Gary and Lee have set up and run. We did Europa, we did Third World War, 3 of the 4 maps of Third World War. This year we did Brazen Chariots, and we set it up as a giant 5x8. We cover the whole table. We play it as a rolling game where each session picks up where the previous one left off. So if you want to play 24 hours of Brazen Chariots, we can do that. If you just
with
want
breaks,
huh?
With breaks, we have breaks.
If you just want, a taste of what one of those big monster games might be like, fine, pop in for a 4-hour session, call it good.
That's a taste.
But that's the kind of bigger stuff we want to do, like the command post exercises. We're going to do the CPXs as often as we can get the guys to show up and do them. You're not going to get the dev team from Flashpoint Campaign show up for your local weekend game store event and do a whole bunch of this, the bigger event with that. We can do that kind of stuff at Origins. This year we brought the Kriegspiel back. We had 2 tables set up with the little study Carol blinders, and we're playing a double blind Kriegspiel with 8 people in it. 8 players at the player tables, and then 8 runners back and forth as the umpires. We again, not the kind of thing you're going to do at your local game store, setting up the big Pico Armor game.
Right.
So those, to be fair, you're in a fairly exceptional area as far as local game stores are even concerned, Brant, in that you have a local game store that does wargaming, and Columbus is one of those locations as well. But many people do not have a FLGS that is going to support board wargaming in any way, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays we're lucky if they'll post a D&D game.
Yeah. Game store or not, like, the same thing applies to you and your, 3 or 4 friends that get together for a Saturday game session. Mm-hmm. You hear about
Case Blue,
the annual Twilight Imperium game where they plan for a big 14-hour all-day session, but they only do that once a year. Most folks getting together with some friends on a weekend, they're getting, like a 4-hour, 6-hour game session, and that's about it. We want to put stuff in front of people that they can't do at home.
Yeah, there are things that you can't. Well, so clarification. There is a Columbus-based Twilight Imperium group that plays monthly, because it's Columbus, so why not? But there's totally stuff that most people are not going to have the chance to experience either at their own place, wherever that is, or even at a local game store, right? So why not lean into that and do stuff that isn't normally available to a lot of people? Dan.
Brant, I can't get ahead in this conversation because I've got this question in my mind.
Go ahead.
What does it cost for you?
$90. Oh, so the pass for Origins is currently $90 for a 4-day pass, just to get that out there. That's not the question you're asking.
Dan, are you asking about what does it cost for an attendee to walk in the door? Or are you asking, like, what is our cost for what we're doing?
Yes, your cost.
Okay, so we do not pay a cent for the concrete that we're sitting on. We are the game organizations that sponsor groups of events, folks like us, HMGS, the Rogue Judges, the Ohio Red Shirts, the different clubs that show up and do events like that.
Okay.
As in return for us providing programming to Origins, they give us the space to do it. So we help fill up their events, and they give us the room to work with. Now, as a part of that, though, keep in mind, we're an event team. We're not a retail organization, so we're not selling stuff out of our booth. If we were selling anything, we'd then have to pay some vendor costs.
Right. Okay.
And that's not what we're doing. So for us, it doesn't cost anything. The GMs, we get badges that we provide the GMs. We're usually able to scrounge up a couple of extras here and there. Gary and I are usually there on exhibitor badges because we help Enterprise Games unload their van and then load it back up at the end of the trip. To my knowledge, they haven't noticed yet that Gary took off with a couple of boxes over the years, but
so he's actually not lying. I did, but they were empty. To be fair, they were kind enough to give me a T-shirt. To be honest,
so I can show up to Origin and say, "Hey, I'm displaying this game, and I want people to play with, and I get a free pass."
Not exactly. No. So there are. You do have to submit the events for approval, and if you provide enough hours of programming as a GM, then you get the badge. If you're just an individual that shows up, says, "Hi, I got games, I want to GM stuff in return for a free badge," then you have to submit those events. They got to get approved and placed somewhere in the exhibit hall or in the game hall, and then they'll provide you the badge. In our case, because we've got a group of folks we're managed a little differently, and that's where those groups, those bigger organizations, get managed a little differently, because we do a lot of our own internal organization. That's why we get some protected space in the game hall. That area that you see on the map that's labeled for Armchair Dragoons, nobody else has games in that area. That's completely us.
And wasn't Harold Buchanan involved in your thingy? Okay.
No, Harold has never been involved to my knowledge.
Harold and some other folks have started. They were jokingly calling it the Wargame Insurgency.
Oh, the thing at Gen Con, yeah.
Gen Con. But they've never come and been a part of what we do at Origins.
And that's, of course, not the real story, but the rumor is that isn't happening anymore because they tried to find each other at Gen Con and couldn't.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're gonna run out of space to find each other. So the first big thing we do is we want mutually supporting, mutually reinforcing efforts there. We want big tentpole events that are the kinds of things that you're going to want to go to a convention to be able to do. And the third thing that we try to focus on, and this is something that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about. It was unintentional when we started it, but now we're sticking with it. And that is, we almost never run a game just a single time. We want to take whatever game it is and have 3 or 4 or 5 iterations of it over the course of the weekend.
Now,
so
how do
that
you do that with
players
Case
have a
Blue?
lot of opportunity to pick and choose the one that best fits their schedule. But the other thing that does is that reduces the effort on the part of the GMs to have to prep too many games. Todd was there doing Normandy 44, and that's all he did. 4 sessions of Normandy 44. That was the only thing he had to prepare and be ready for. And so he was able to have a really good teaching plan developed ahead of time for showing folks through the game and teaching them and how it all works. That he only had to do that for 1 game. We didn't throw 3 or 4 or 5 games at him to try and sort out. So,
well, but we're going to try that next year.
Maybe. We've had vendors in the past that sort of yelled at us about, well, no, I want as many of my different games as possible in front of people. Fine, then you show up and GM them, because I'm not going to ask our GMs to try and prep 4 different games. That's too much for them to try to do. And that's more effort than we're going to put them through. So we weren't going to do that kind of stuff to them. That's why, like Gary and Lee's Brazen Chariots game, we run 6 sessions of that. Instead of 4 or 5 different games, we run 1 big game the whole weekend. So, in the case of something like Pico Armor or the Napoleonic Minis games, like those have a table full of terrain you got to set up. We're not going to set that thing up and tear it down.
That's got to be crazy, man.
It up for the weekend.
And like this Pico Armor, how you supposed to? I got sausage fingers. How am I going to pick that up?
So what they do is
tweezers, Dan. Tweezers are the key, the magical tool that allows you to play these games.
Yeah, Gregory has based them to where there's 3 or 4 tanks on a small, like 1 by 1 inch piece of wood. So it's in effect a 3D counter that you pick up and move around.
And let me, you know what? I understand this Pico Armor, but it's really tiny.
Well, that's why it's Pico and not Micro. It's smaller than Micro.
I read Greek, okay?
I mean, at least it's not nano armor.
Like I understand, but it's cool to have, but they're really tiny, man. Some people paint this stuff, and it's just, God, man,
Yeah, these aren't overly detailed paintings, but the effect of a bunch of small 3D counters all over a large 3D hex map is pretty cool. It looks cool. I mean,
that's a good
go
point.
Through the photos that we've got on the site and see.
Yeah, I think what we need to do next year is emphasize stacking in the games that we run.
How
so
you gonna do that?
the bigger the stacks that 4 tables of Europa, that's easy.
I was gonna say.
Problem solved.
Yeah, but you know this
You need
stacking
2 OCS
stuff.
games, and we'll stack
This
all kinds of
stacking stuff.
Stacking in OCS isn't that bad.
This stacking stuff looks very dangerous to me, because when you have all these kids running around and all these stoned and smelly people in the bloody place, and one guy comes over and knocks the table a little bit, you're screwed.
I can't speak to stoned, but I think there was one odoriferous person that I encountered the entire 4 days I was there.
What word did you use?
Folks did a pretty solid
Odoriferous.
job of actually like hitting the showers on a regular basis. There were a few people that needed belts that did not have them.
I mean, we've only been complaining about this since literally 1975. So one would hope that even the densest of those individuals would have gotten the message by now to wear deodorant and take a shower.
Yeah, and like you said, that doesn't seem to have been an issue for the last couple of years. This year, the bigger issue that I noticed was a lack of belts among those who needed them. There were a few tail feathers flapping around that didn't need to be.
Oh dear! Now that's a fact. That was noticed as well. Belts, suspenders, I don't care. Robes, I don't care what you got. Wear a cloak. I mean, that's cool. Even it's a game convention. You wear a cloak, you'll fit right in anyway.
Extra long t-shirt, that would be fine.
So,
John,
whatever it takes, man.
We haven't done flat top double blind. We've done some Second World War at Sea games double blind. We did a Coral Sea game one year, and we did Midway one year. So we've done some double blind naval games. The GM that does those for us was not able to make it either of the last 2 years. He had a daughter getting married one year, and then the other year he had a work conflict come up.
That's no excuse.
We're hoping to have Rick back next year. Rick is like many of our other GMs. Gary is one of them. Todd is one of them. Lee is one of them who, came and played a bunch of games with us. And then after a couple of years of playing games with us, Stockholm syndrome kicked in and they just said, well, fine, I'll be a GM. What the heck? And that's how our GM crew continues to grow. So, Achilles, I don't know that we're going to get enough space to run Fletcher Pratt,
which requires a gymnasium floor, as I recall.
Now, here's what I will say. We could work out a deal with the HMGS dudes to borrow some of their space, because they did have a giant Kazarine Pass game on the floor that took up about a 25 by 30 space. So they did have some space to game there. I know further up, I think it was Molotov Cockatiel was asking about the shirt. So it's not just any old floral shirt. It's a Dragoon specific Hawaiian shirt. And so I had two of these that I brought, one for me and one for Mike Colello, the other main guy from the Dragoons who helps with the Origins program. We had a third one that we put in the raffle. And I don't think Gary knew this because he had left already by Sunday morning, but my daughter, who was helping oversee the raffle cups and keeping track of the prizes, getting them put out and covered up each day. Anybody that was playing in a game that couldn't use their raffle ticket because they weren't going to be there Sunday or whatever, she wrote Gary's name on it and put it in the raffle cup with the other one of these shirts.
Okay.
And if you go back and watch the raffle video as I'm pulling them out, like Gary, he's not here. Gary's not. But there were actually two other people that threw their name in that cup, and neither one of them were there on Sunday morning. So we ended up giving it to another dude that was there. But yeah, after you were picking on the shirt, McKenna decided to throw your name in the raffle cup for it multiple times.
I was sent this, man.
Awesome.
War Stories, a World War II RPG from who's the publisher? Is that Year Zero is
Year Zero is Free League's house system. But similar to the Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, you can use that rule system if you acknowledge it through whatever licensing kinds of things they have. So there are other people doing stuff with the Year Zero system.
So, Bran, I need you to make this happen. There was a LARP at one point that was held in, I think I'm going to say Denmark, but it may have been Sweden. It was a weekend-long LARP where they actually rented a vessel of the Swedish Navy, and they had their Battlestar Galactica LARP on the naval vessel.
That's too heavy. That's wicked.
I mean, does that not sound awesome? No, right?
So I don't know if you know about this. Rex Bryant up in
Canada.
There
are no boats in Columbus. I'm aware of that. Yes.
So Rex Bryant up in Canada does a bunch of mega games throughout the year. He'll help organize and run different mega games. And they did one that was some sort of post-apocalyptic World War III something or other. I don't remember the exact scenario, but they used the kind of the Canadian equivalent of the NORAD bunker that's, like 40 miles east of Ottawa or west of Ottawa. That's it's the old Cold War sort of command post bomb shelter thing that has since been decommissioned and is now a museum. So they had this mega game being played in the bunker that the Canadian government would have hidden in the event of a nuclear war. Which was kind of cool. Yeah.
We could do one on the USS Cod, which my father-in-law has actually expressed interest in visiting. I've been on it already, but he hasn't apparently.
What about playing some? Yeah, doesn't New York have a nuclear sub that's open to the public in the harbor?
Sure, I don't know.
Yeah, I've been to that. We should play a submarine game.
There used to be
let's hijack the submarine and threaten Atlantic shipping. Yes, I agree. That would be a cool LARP. It might be brief.
It's the first nuclear sub.
Yeah, there used to be a World War II era attack sub, and anchored at Patriots Point down in Charleston. They ended up having to tow it out of there because it was decomposing. So
that's bad news. A shocking number of historic United States naval vessels have been literally sold for scrap and sent to, Pittsburgh or whatever.
That's what happened with the Clamagore. They had
a fate worse than death to be sent to Pittsburgh.
So
I'd like to have one of those ships on my lawn.
Yeah. So for the war game stuff that was going on, and
the local BFW has a 105 millimeter howitzer out front. I might be hijacking that.
Do we have anybody? I don't know who all's in the chat necessarily because I've been watching the screen, not the chat. Do we have folks in the chat that have been to that have joined us at Origins for stuff in the past?
Definitely at least one or two.
Okay. Well, Fucko's floating around in there somewhere.
Yeah, he's here. He was floating around. He didn't play anything with us, but he was there.
He's afraid of real wargaming.
He went to play Settlers of Catan with the Cabs people.
I thought he was doing the Smurf Wars game over with the
that actually looked hilarious. I wouldn't play it, but it looked enjoyable if you're into that kind of thing. At one point, you'll remember this kind of thing. This doesn't seem to happen very often anymore. Where I don't know if it's Gen Con or Origins. I want to say Origins because I've been to a lot more Origins than Gen Con, where there was a 40K game that was literally an entire Space Marine chapter, which is like 1,000 dudes plus like 50 vehicles. Up against some giant orc horde or something like that. It was like a 20 by 30 foot space. It was amazing.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
When I first started going to Origins 20 years ago, there were some massive minis games running around on there. I mean, some really big, pretty elaborate. They had one that was probably 18 to 20 feet wide all together with the tables they'd shoved together. It was the walls of Troy. They were doing the attack, the Greek attack on the city of Troy.
Was it last year that somebody did? Was it Tarawa? That was pretty cool.
I think that
might have been the year before.
Ago, but yeah, they could have done it multiple years. But we've got some pictures of that one somewhere. The reason I'm asking about if we've got folks in the crowd that have come to Origins. So when we first started the wargaming program in 2014, we got about a 10 by 20 spot kind of up against a wall, tucked in out of the way somewhere. We were between the Zvezda guys on one side and the My Little Pony collectible card game on the other side of us. And we were across the aisle from the Walking Dead game. But we had a lot of fun. And so we've slowly expanded the footprint from there. A couple of years, we had some retail booths with us. The last couple of years, so since the pandemic, we've basically been in a 20 by 40 space. The pandemic year, not 2020, but 2021, that weird October Origins. And then the couple of years since then, we'd been in a 20 by 40. This year, we doubled that footprint. We had a 40 by 40 all to ourselves, nobody we were sharing the space with. And we had over 100 events just in that space. That doesn't count what we had up in the War College. That was just the game events and the couple of CPX boot camps we had with us. We had right at about 300 players total come through. That's not 300 separate people. Like one person plays in 4 different games with us. That counts 4 times. But still, we had
nobody tell Gamma that though. That's fine.
No, Gamma, no, because we're tracking attendance by event, but we average 3 players per war game for 5 days worth of wargaming. And when you start adding up those player counts, you know, Gary, you and I have had this conversation, but to put it out there for everybody else, what other war game specific conventions out there are running 100+ war game events and bringing in over 300 player sessions, individual player sessions for a weekend of wargaming?
The only real events that are comparable are, and it's not an exact analogy, are WBC and Consim World Expo, right? But in both of those cases, the bulk of the events are not necessarily like, you know, events out of a booklet or event listing or something like that. It's just stuff that people got together on their own to go set up and play, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is that if you want to start counting random pickup games or privately arranged things or whatever, then at that point, how many more war games at Origins are we adding to the head count?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like Buckeye Game Fest, you know, in the war room, you probably had 75, 80 different distinct games played at some point over that long weekend there. And there were like 18 of them were actually in the Buckeye Game Fest program.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of them were things that people had arranged.
Mm-hmm.
I know I had 3 that were scheduled that were in the program, but the game of the 17-14 game that I played in was not in the program. The John Company game I played in was not in the program. Sitting down with Tim and playing True Command was not in the program. So, I mean, those things absolutely happen, but they happen at Origins too.
Sure. So here's an idea, though.
Well, just real quick, stacking limit.
No,
I
go
see
ahead.
that you're throwing Historicon in there. That's minis, dudes. That's not tabletop stuff. If you want to start adding the mini stuff, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to add the HMGS guys with their 40 by 80 space. I'm going to throw in the Frattenspiel guys with their 6 tables. I'm going to throw in the Warlord guys with their own booth full of just minis wargaming stuff. If you want to start adding the minis guys, that's fine. We're going to go back and add all the minis guys from Origins also. So
wait, I have a question.
Spice is not exactly a card game, was it?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Question.
I can't get on with this conversation without the question being answered.
Go ahead.
So if you're next to the My Pony booth, My Little Pony booth, and we look at them and say, bloody hell, who the hell gets into My Pony this much? Do they think the same?
So I have opinions on this. First of all, it is not my job, nor do I have time to criticize anybody else for having fun doing what they find fun. Okay, so if we are situated, and we were pretty close to the Smurf battles, and I took pictures of that. I'm like, fucking Smurf battles. I mean, it's not my thing, but I bet a whole pile of people had a blast with that. I'm not gonna. What am I gonna do? Go over.
I asked McKenna several times if she wanted to go play in Smurf battles.
I mean, what am I gonna do? Go take a dump on their table with the Smurf land? I mean, come on. I got time for that. No, but I would caution people.
Because don't tell me you don't think they're weird.
I mean, well, you know, I just made fun of the Settlers of Catan people too, but it's done out of love. But I'm not begrudging the Catan people playing Catan and having fun. I didn't see anybody playing Settlers of Catan, for the record. I'm sure it was there, but I didn't see it. But I mean, I wasn't looking for it either. But they have had huge Catan tournaments in the past too. So, you know, like incorporating some of that like loose miniature stuff. I don't know if it's all associated with HMGS or not. I didn't think so. Into that area is not necessarily a terrible idea.
Well, no, except that the
I mean, you got to add space to make it work, right?
We got to add space to make it work, which means we're now managing multiple islands, because they're at a certain point, Gamma's got to put a cross island there somewhere just for traffic control.
No, they don't.
But at a certain point, there's only so much of that I feel like trying to manage for other people. And if the HMGS guys are capable of managing their own space, let them, so that I don't have to.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. So Brant, folks, Brant needs assistance. So a couple of you should come to Origins next year and just hang around and do stuff for Brant so he can actually have a little bit of fun for a change.
Most of the headaches are actually in like January, February, trying to, nail down the events that we need to submit for people.
Oh, and dealing with the inevitable gamma nonsense. So there's
we've
that.
gotten pretty good at mitigating that now that we know where most of the potholes are. Now
30 years
still
in,
goes
yeah.
wrong every year just because it's gamma and they can't help themselves. But they're having to get more creative in, how they screw things up, because we've 10 years of this, we've been able to mitigate the worst of it. But the point I wanted to make in all of this, like the attendance this year was just over 17,000.
Yeah, it was up like 5% or 6% or something like that from last year, something like that.
17,700. It was a 10% increase over last year.
There you
go. So look, if 2% of those folks are people willing to sit down and play a war game, that's over 350 folks that you've got potentially playing war games with you. And where are there other war game events that big? Adepticon and Historicon, we ain't counting those, right? Those are minis conventions. We're not adding those in. But if you start piling up the actual tabletop war game conventions out there, or war game focused ones, but even WBC, I mean, Gary, you've been to WBC. There's a ton of war gamers that show up there, and a bunch of the war game companies, which help bring the war gamers in. Dan, you've been too, But WBC as a whole is not war game specific. I mean, there's a lot of other shit that happens at WBC.
There is.
The majority.
I mean, yeah, I'd say that's fair, right? I mean, there's plenty of wargaming happening there, but not necessarily. I think if you're going to like assign a metric to it, you should probably assign it by unique participants. Okay. In terms of how many different people are, individual people are going to participate in this particular category of event.
I saw 2 people dressed up in My Little Pony at WBC. So come on.
Okay. I mean, whatever. I don't care. There's probably a My Little Pony game and they went the thematically appropriate. I mean, I can get behind people getting into the stuff they're doing. There was years ago at the Soldiery, I think. No, not the Soldiery. It was at the War Zone in Cleveland. There was a Star Wars RPG game running, and I'm in there just shopping or whatever. This is like 25 years ago. And they're starting their game, and the game master stands up and says, "Okay, all rise for the Star Wars theme." And they all stood up and played the Star Wars theme before the game. I'm like, wow, these guys are into it, man. And you know what? That's fantastic. Is it nerdy? Yes.
Yeah. But that's the point.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's where you can be that kind of nerdy. So, John, I see your comment about 70% of the games at WBC are not war games. Like, that's just reinforcing the point that, like, the preponderance of games at Origins are not war games, but there's more than enough war games to keep you busy.
Yes, but also that, like, this is what John is saying is correct, but it can be deceptive because the non-wargaming parts of WBC have grown noticeably faster than the wargaming parts of WBC, right? I suspect there's just as many people playing war games at WBC as there ever have been, maybe more. But there's other people. That thing draws like 7,000 people, doesn't it? Something like that, 5,000, something like that. It's big. It's a big event.
It's nice, man. It's nice.
You're generally not tripping over people too much because it's all like a labyrinth of tiny corridors and little rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah, I lost weight walking there.
I probably put a lot of steps in just walking back and forth, lost in that maze. Where the fuck am I?
That's how Gamma Expo was out in Reno.
Yeah, and then it turned out after like 45 minutes of walking around and stopping 3 times to ask people for directions that the wargaming area was directly in the door in front of where we parked the car. So
that's awesome.
But you know something? When the only time I went to WBC that time there, where they have the tournaments upstairs.
I'm taking Scott Bell's word for this. That's still a big attendance, though. Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't cut me off like that.
I'm sorry, Dan. Please continue.
What was I talking about? Toilets?
He can't continue. He doesn't remember what
As a matter of fact, upstairs, where it's the competition room there, whatever, it's all nice and wood. And it's funny, I said toilets because they have the nicest toilets upstairs. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I bet they do.
So every time I say something, Brant says, Yeah, and cuts me off. You don't suffer food, Brent.
Well, in fairness, Dan, cutting you off is kind of something we do here on the show. To be fair,
everything I say, Brent, and he continues this conversation. What the hell?
There was that great time when, and this wasn't on purpose, although we would have done it on purpose because it was hilarious, where I'm on the floor at Compass Expo doing the show, and Dan's sitting there talking, and nobody can hear him. So we just talked over him. The whole pretending he wasn't there because we couldn't hear him anyway.
I remember watching a bunch of that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big World at War tour. For those interested, there's a big World at War tournament at WBC that usually draws something like 20 plus or minus 4 people, something like that. It's a lot.
Yeah, and they have these extra big maps, like bigger counters, supersized maps type thing. Like, how the hell you do that?
You go to a print shop and have them blow the map up for you.
So how the hell? First of all, they won't do it because it's copywritten.
Depends. You got to go to a shady print shop like we have here in Akron, Ohio.
Well, in the case of MMP, the first Origins I ever went to in 2005, MMP was in the booth across the aisle from us, and they had this giant. We jokingly called it my first squad leader. They had a giant squad leader demo set on the table that they had blown up one of the squad leader maps to where they were like 3-inch hexes, and they had these giant 1.5-inch foam counters. That, I mean, like 16 counters on the table because that's all it will fit at that point. The MMP guys own the maps. Like, they can go blow up whatever the hell they want at that point.
Right.
So, it was a cool demo set to have on the table there to be able to show off for folks. The key thing that, I want folks to remember out of this is, look, there's plenty of wargaming there. And for folks that are looking at, hey, I was at Origins in 1979. Origins today doesn't look like that. Where the hell on the planet looks like it did in 1970? Like, nothing does. The mall doesn't. The bookstore doesn't.
The malls are mostly bulldozed at this point. One of the local malls around here is now an Amazon hub.
Distro center, yeah.
Yeah.
But for folks that are complaining that Origins doesn't have that 256 player tournament of the Russian campaign, fine. What convention does?
Yeah, no kidding.
WBC has, and so, John and Scott and some of the other folks that have done WBC, what's the highest player count in one of the war game tournaments that you have there? Is there anything bigger than 16? I could see a player ASL tournament.
Yeah. I'm not aware that there is an ASL tournament there. There probably is.
Yes,
but there's definitely ASL play happening. Let me put it that way.
There was a tournament.
So not in the open gaming area. There are war game tournaments that are out amongst the general populace, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that like master list of secret sauce games that they maintain at WBC by the secret committee of the Star Chamber that runs the place. World at War draws more than 16 at least some of the time. So. Yeah, it could potentially do that. There was a GCACW tournament last year.
Yeah, but are they getting more than 16 or so? 20, 24 maybe?
Unlikely. No, those are going to top out, I predict it at something like that. But you know what? There's crazy stuff getting played. Like Bowl Bound gets a tournament at WBC every year. Yeah. I find that inexplicable. But there you go. Wingspan had 150 people. That's like the new hotness, though. That's almost cheating.
Well, yeah, okay, great. Wingspan gets you 150 people because Wingspan sold 17 million copies. My point is the war game tournaments aren't going to look like they did in the 70s and early 80s. They're just not. They never will. And so don't. If that's the metric by which you're going to judge whether or not Origins is a worthwhile convention for you to attend, go invent a time machine because that's the only way that's going to happen. But again, even an event like not WBC, but even an event like Concept World Expo is not very similar to like Origins 1980, right? Yeah, I absolutely. So there's and this isn't saying that they should shut down Concept World Expo and everybody come to Origins. Go to Concept World Expo. Absolutely.
Those two events are serving very different purposes.
Exactly. But, But a couple of things. One, I think game players will find plenty to do, particularly if you're one of those folks that's a bit of a gaming omnivore, more like, because Gary and I both have plenty of role-playing stuff in our private collections on top of all the wargaming things that we have. Mm-hmm. There's other stuff that we're going to play and that we're going to shop through while we're at Origins. And there are years when I come home with way more RPG stuff than I do wargame stuff.
Me, not usually, but it happened this year.
I was going to ask you, is this a mission that you're on, or you're just going there for the camaraderie of the stuff?
He's like the Blues Brothers. He's on a mission from Gad.
I enjoy the hell out of Origins. It's a lot of fun for me because it covers a lot of bases of things that I'm interested in. And I was watching Wargaming dwindle from when I was there in 2005 to what it is to what it was 8 or 10 years ago. And we needed to do something to bring it back and give it a little more prominence at a convention that was originally created for Wargaming.
Well, am I wrong to say that Wargaming has never been bigger? Because there was only like the Avalon Hill convention or the Origins convention back then. And now it's like there's tons of conventions, man. It's bigger than it ever was.
I think that's hard to quantify, but it's impossible to quantify from just looking at conventions.
Well, there wasn't YouTube. There wasn't us yapping our brains out about war games. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
It's more connected now, man.
Well, yes, absolutely. But you've also got a lot of little siloed communities, right? Both on the internet and at conventions, right? I mean, what is the percentage of people that attend both Origins or Gen Con and Consim World Expo or WBC, for example? I would venture to say that number is not zero, but it's probably not that big, right? Yeah. People are looking for a specific kind of experience, and they're going to go to events that provide that experience.
Yeah. So Dan, what I will say is if you think there are more conventions now, there probably are in total, but it's not maybe. But it's not like in 1980 there were 3. If you go pull open an old Dragon magazine or an S&T and go look at the convention listings in there, there's there are 2 pages worth of convention listings.
You're right.
And then another 2 pages of people looking for rides to conventions, which was always fun. But what's happened is the rest of the gaming world has grown up around where wargaming for the longest time, like that was your primary option if you were a strategy gamer. And things like Catan and Ticket to Ride just didn't exist. Like you were playing Monopoly and Parcheesi, or you were playing war games. There were some middle ground with some of those older Avalon Hill non-war games, things like Acquire or the Win Place and Show, whatever it was, the horse racing game. I mean, there was
Win Place and Show, yeah.
Yeah, there were ones like that. Lie, Cheat, and Steal was always a fun one that I enjoyed.
Have you actually seen Monopoly played at a convention?
Nope, not a chance.
Okay. I've been going to conventions. I've been going to conventions since like 1992, and I've never seen Monopoly played at any convention.
Like in terms of the game options you had available to you back then, there weren't a ton of different options. Whereas now you've got, thousands upon thousands of non-war game tabletop games that you can sit down and play, and you will at conventions like that. On top of the role-playing events, on top of the War College, on top of the Amped Guard guys with the boffers that you put the kids over there and go run around and bang on each other. And that's fine. Go have a good time with all that. But don't just dismiss it out of hand because there's no wargaming there, because that's just not true. For the vendors,
it is very difficult for me to take people saying that. In fact, I think the only people saying that, Brant, are people trying to aggravate you specifically.
Probably. So that is probably the case.
Because they know if they say it anywhere, it's like saying Beetlejuice 3 times. And it's like Brant pops up. It's like, what?
It used to aggravate me a lot more. These days, I just know people are kind of fucking with me.
Yes.
But on the vendor front, the other thing that I will say is, man, there's an audience there to sell those games to. It's there. And yeah, it's a hurdle. Like there's no denying it's a hurdle to have to pack your stuff up, haul it all out to whatever convention. And that's the thing. People talk about, Columbus is kind of a haul. Man, who the hell is based in Phoenix? Like everybody has to drive to Consim World Expo.
Yeah.
There's no Wargaming publisher based there.
No,
So
and there's relatively few locals too. I mean, there's a few locals, but there's not that much, from what I understand. There's not that many locals. John Stanley, thank you so much for the support. I do think that the internet has conditioned people for the last 20 or so years into being somewhat antisocial in the ways that we would traditionally understand being social.
They're differently social.
Gary, you know what? Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm sitting down at work and I'm watching all these people coming in, getting their food, this and that. I heard that, Brent. And everybody's on their phones, right? And I'm thinking, what the hell? We didn't do that when we were young, this and this and that. And then I thought, hold on, before you interrupt me, for God's sakes.
I thought interrupting was what we did.
Yeah.
Keep going. I'm holding my reply. Keep going.
So, and the thing is that we're the ones not connected if you're not on the phone, because the singularity is coming. Kurzweil said it, and these guys are plugged in.
Kurzweil.
They're way ahead of us.
Werner Vinge came up with that term, although I think Kurzweil talked about it too. So people say things like that. They say, "Oh, these people have their noses buried in their phones all the time." Okay. And is that maybe rude in some contexts? Absolutely.
Yes.
It used to be people had their noses buried in the newspaper instead. What's the difference?
Rudeness is rudeness.
Well, that's my point. It's not really as different as certain old people yelling at the clouds would have us believe.
You're right again. You're right. I hate when you're right.
I am a font of esoteric wisdom.
Yeah, my daughter ends up with her nose buried in her phone quite regularly. She's a young teenager. That's what they do. That said, she's not necessarily socializing with the people in the room, but she's still socializing because she's talking to like 6 different people when she's got her nose in the phone, sitting, in her bedroom at night, or,
So, and that's actually a great point, because and this is, what is she, 15?
13. She'd be 14.
Okay. So she's a young teen. Okay. So, yep. And people are going to characterize young teens as people who do this all the time. But she was constantly engaged. Yeah, she had her nose in her phone a lot, but she was constantly engaging with us and everybody else there. So what do you want? I mean, it's not like she's ignoring people or being rude. It's just it's a generational thing that
it is now. Yeah,
old geezers aren't used to. So what?
I'm an old geezer.
Well, yeah, we're all old geezers except for Brad, who is a youngster.
Brad, how old are you?
I'm on the north side of 50, dude.
Ooh.
Barely.
Christ, you look like you're 20.
Barely.
I'll be 52 at the end of next week.
Punk.
You're still working, or you're living off the fat?
Oh, God, no, I'm working. Man, this is the U.S. Yeah. You're not allowed to retire until you're dead.
That's true. Where retirement is going away in this country anyway, so that'll be something that you hear about happening in Switzerland.
Yeah.
So,
the point Gary was making on the kids being there. So we had 3 kids running around our area that were kind of part of our crew. My daughter was there and she handles a bunch of the admin tasks for us. She wanted to get engaged and be involved at Origins and help out. So she's the one that deals with the distributing and collecting raffle tickets, making sure that the raffle prizes are on display properly for folks to be able to enter the raffle for those things. She hands out the event attendance slips that the GMs have to fill out for how many people were there. And then she gets all the tickets from the GMs and gets all that stuff turned into the Origins HQ for us. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's going on all throughout the day. So there's plenty keeping her busy running around. We had James Sterrett's son Ian was there, and Ian,
and he's what, 5, 6?
Huh?
He's what, 5 or 6?
Yeah.
Ian, no, he's like 17, something
Ian
like that.
Is 17 or so, but Ian was one of our GMs. Ian was actually the GM for the games of We Are Coming Nineveh. And then Jim Snyder's daughter was floating around. She wasn't really helping with part of the booth as staff, but she was helping us during setup and teardown with helping get all the raffle stuff organized and get the tablecloths out and the table signs taped together and stood up. John, I've been this has been one of my beefs with Wargaming for a long time, up until 4 or 5 years ago when you started seeing more of the kids show up at Wargaming events. Man, every Wargame room I was in, I was the youngest guy in the room. From age 25 to age 45, I was the youngest Wargamer in the room in all the rooms I was in. And that was kind of nuts.
I can't believe John actually said you're a youngin, because he's got that Filipino skin that I thought he was like 12. You know what I'm saying?
John doesn't look that young. John does have that, he's got very good complexion. I want to circle back to what Jeff Feeler's saying here, though, because this highlights, Jeff, thank you for the support, and it's much appreciated. This highlights the importance of a wargaming presence at Origins. People complain about the graying of the hobby and stuff like that. Well, okay, what are we doing about that? Well, those of us participating in the wargaming program at Origins, that's what we're doing about it. Because there are a lot of younger people, many of them not necessarily young war gamers, that you might be able to expose to war games. And both this year and last year, we had one of the funniest things I saw this year was Doc teaching a bunch of kids how to play campaigns in Europe. Doc from Decision. Yeah, that was awesome, though.
You would never think, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was like one somewhat older person at the table, I think, but the other 2 or 3 people were teenagers. That's fantastic.
And you just said something that said, what are we going to do about it? Why do we have to do about anything? Like, why are we, when I say we, you guys, why are you guys like in the forefront of the missionary, like preaching war games? Hey. Who gives a shit?
Well, why are we doing this right now? I mean, it's not necessarily a different thing, right? We've chosen to put some effort into promoting a hobby and community that we like and we enjoy participating in, and why not open it up to more people, right? Including some people.
I don't see how it's any of Dan's business what I do in the missionary position.
I certainly don't care. That is up to you. Whatever you people are doing down in North Carolina is definitely NMFB.
I'm visual.
If you know what I mean. This is the problem with an imagination, Dan, is you don't want that. It's too much imagination.
I do this because I love it. Period.
So, and I would encourage people to make an effort to be extra welcoming to people that don't necessarily fit their demographic of whatever it is they're doing. The traditional expectation of what somebody is, what kind of people get involved in these kind of games, which, let's face it, it's mostly old white dudes, right?
Well, look, in Canada, in Quebec or Montreal, we have a war game table and we have a little pot full of joints, so it attracts people.
I suppose, man. I would. There's no way I could partake of. I don't even drink when I'm gaming, Dan. I gotta tell you, I do not do it because
for counter clipping,
it makes me tired, and then I want to take a nap. So
we had probably a dozen, maybe more women go through, cycle through the wargaming area this year, sitting down to play.
Mm-hmm.
We had a couple of them were like, clearly were there because they were humoring somebody else they were with, but we had a couple of them that came over and played, just as a single person showed up, said, "Hey, I'm here to play this game," and hopped in. And it wasn't all the Votes for Women in Space Empires 4X. Like, we had one in one of the Normandy 44 games. We had one in
it happens. Cool. We had a middle-aged lady that stepped into did 2 slots of Europa with us and spent the time between the 2 slots reading the rule book.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And she was like retired Air Force, so she fit right in.
We've got a dad that brought his son a couple of years ago and jumped in one of our games and has come back every year now looking specifically for our event area to jump in games with us, brings his son with him. Like, that's part of what they do at Origins. They don't come pitch a tent in our area every year where they're only gaming with us, but they make it a point each year at Origins to come over and play 2 or 3 things with us while they're there. But it's this dad and his son that come over and play a bunch of stuff.
It's funny. I don't know. I have to ask this question. We have a new general in charge of the whole shebang, Army, Navy, and all that, and it's a woman. So women playing war games, do they bring a different strategy? Because it's always been men. It's always been men at the top. So because we don't think the same way, whether we like it or not.
I don't know if I'd say different strategy, but yeah, people from different backgrounds are going to approach games differently. I think that's completely normal and expected. Right? That's not even a women thing. That's just somebody from, somebody from a different background than being a suburbanite might approach it differently than a suburbanite would. I don't think that's weird.
I don't know if I'm saying something wrong saying that.
No, I don't think you're saying anything wrong. I just think I think the point you're trying to make is broader than the way you're making it.
Yeah. I think, in terms of the game conventions, one of the biggest things is just maintaining that visibility. Right. And the bigger footprint we have, the more visible we are for other folks to find the wargaming that's going on. And again, like I've banged on the drum long enough for Origins, but whether it's at Origins or whether they want to restart the insurgency at Gen Con, or whether they want to start clustering a bunch of wargame tables together at Kubla Con or Liberty Con, or beef up the wargaming presence at PresCon, whatever it is, like, let's start finding those local conventions. Let's show up. Let's get a whole bunch of wargame tables in one area together. You kind of have this rally point for the wargamers to know that they've got a bit of a home base to work from. And that's what we've been able to provide now at Origins. And that'd be great to see folks do that at other conventions also. Not as many of them have the infrastructure for the vendors and retailers to be able to show up that something like an Origins or a Gen Con does.
Mm-hmm.
Kubla Con can get pretty big. So can the Strategicon conventions out on the left coast. But even the biggest Strategicon out there, or not the biggest, the most recent one back in Memorial Day, they still didn't have anywhere close to the number of wargaming events that we did, and their attendance is 1/4 of what Origins brings in, maybe. So there's plenty of it there. We need the folks like the Lock and Load to come back, like the Worthingtons of the world to show up. Those mid-range publishers. Look, GMT's already represented in there. Decision's already there. I would love to have MMP show up. Probably aren't. Yeah. Somebody needs to bring a cat and show up with a cat.
Look at that pussy.
So crass.
Can we get Legion to show up? Can we get Worthington to show up? Can we get somebody to show up with VUCA? Can we get, these sort of mid-tier publishers, of which there's plenty of them and all making great games? Can we get those guys to show up?
Unfortunately, I do think, and I recognize that it's maybe not this simple, but I do think Gamma has priced a lot of those publishers out of having a presence at Origin. So they think it's not worth their time to go because they can't afford to be a vendor because they won't make enough money back. That's kind of a different problem, but.
So as I've told plenty of folks over the years, I don't want any publisher out there to make a bad business decision because I want them to be around as successful businesses.
Absolutely. Even if Gamma said, "Hey, you're a recognized publisher, member of Gamma, you can have the X amount of space for free," there's still a huge additional cost on top of that, other than the booth space. Hotel and
life support,
transportation. I got to rent a big truck to get the stuff all here, right? And then they don't give me friggin' carts, or a pallet jack, so I've got to manually unload the boxes all individually from the back of my truck, and I'm an 80-year-old man, and I have to park 10 blocks away, and in the 106-degree heat.
No.
Gamma is the GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association. It's the group that runs. They do a bunch of stuff, but they run Origins.
And I remember.
So the argument that I would make in terms of the cost issue is, if you simply look at it as a straight, this is what it cost me to be at Origins, this is what I made while at Origins, is B greater than A. There's value in that math because it's an immediate payoff to see that. Is there a longer term value in being exposed to a wider audience for folks to know who you are and that you exist and what you provide? And so if you look at it as more of a marketing cost overall, from which you happen to be able to recoup some of your immediate money out, then maybe the math works out a little differently. And one of the conversations that we'd had years ago with a war game publisher there, and that we've had with some of the other non-war game publishers since, is that the first year you show up, you're a curiosity, right? Yeah. Folks are going to kind of stick their head in and go, "Oh, hey, who are you? What do you got? You know, what's going on here?" And you may not make a ton of money because folks were planning on spending stuff somewhere else. You're going to pick up some curiosity passersby, some curiosity sales. The next year, people are going to remember you and they go, "Oh, hey, cool, you're back. Hey, you know, glad to see you here. What do you got that's new? Show me what you got that's going on." The third year, people are looking for you. "Hey, I was planning on, I knew you were going to be here. I was looking for you. I was planning on you being here," whatever it was.
You're already down. You're already down $100,000 in 3 years. Easy.
It's probably closer to about 20.
What?
So,
that's still a lot of money for
a lot of money.
I mean, remember that a lot of war game publishers are basically garage level operations, right? Yeah. With, you know, how many exceptions are there? Like half a dozen, if that.
Well,
one of whom is at Origins every year.
Over the course of 3 years, that 20 total is you're going to be out roughly $4,000 to $5,000, probably close to $5,000 for booth and space cost in the convention.
Yeah, but how much did you spend, Brant?
A lot less than that because it's 20 years ago. But so you're going to be out, you know, $4,000 to $5,000 for the booth space, the actual chunk of concrete you're setting up on. You're going to be out a couple of thousand each year for the transportation and lodging and food, right?
Yeah.
You got to get there. You got to haul your stuff there. You got to eat while you're there.
Yes.
Right? You're probably going to be out a couple of grand once up front just to make sure that your booth decor is in order, right? Whatever pop-up signs and banners and other things you need for the booth. But that's a one-time cost because you can reuse those things year to year. And then you're probably going to be out a couple of grand to bump up your inventory ahead of showing up at the convention each year, whether it's an extra print run of a particular game or, hey, I've got a new game getting delivered in April, but I know I'm going to Origins in June. So let me go ahead and print an extra 30, 40, 50 copies of that to make sure I got enough inventory to get through the conventions. The other thing is, I doubt there are a whole lot of folks out there that would make Origins the only convention that they go to, right? If you're going to Origins, you're probably or Gen Con, or, you know, again, a couple of those other bigger ones like a Kubla Khan, you're probably big enough that you're able to handle those mid-sized regional conventions. Jeff is always stumping for Yukon up there in Michigan, right? You're probably, if you're driving distance of Yukon, you could probably add that one to your rotation pretty easily. If you're down in the Southeast, Liberty Con over in Chattanooga, you could add that fairly easily. You
Jeff
know,
is from the Yukon.
Huh?
Jeff is from the Yukon.
No.
There is a con called Yukon in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay.
I think it's in Ann Arbor, right? Am I right about that?
Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti.
But you know,
yeah, it's somewhere in Michigan, so I can't go there.
Brant, you're spewing out numbers, so it makes you look like you know what you're talking about. So I'm gonna throw you a curveball here. You're gonna tell me Academy Games only spends $5,000 or something when you go to WBC? Yeah.
No. So even at Origins, there's no way they're only spending $5,000 because they've got a huge booth, right? They get a 30 by 20 booth island space. That space alone is going to cost them. Well, hell, I'll tell you in just a second.
How much? Yeah,
I can guess. I'm going to guess, and I'll tell you if I was right or not. And you're just going to have to trust me.
What's your guess, Gary?
$20,000.
Yeah, so a 20 by 20 island, assuming they paid it before they left Origins, is $5,000.
Well, that's less than I thought. That's still a lot of money, though. And Academy is bigger than, operating out of Uva's garage. So,
yeah.
Well, ask me in 2025. Not this year. So, you put it that way.
Man.
For what it's worth, hang on, Gary. There it is. If you want to throw that on screen there, that's the booth cost for next year.
For what size?
Well, it'll show you all the different sizes there. Gary,
where did you send me that?
No. It's in StreamYard.
Oh, okay.
You can share the screen.
Oh, look at this. And this is on their website, folks. So we're not spilling government secrets here.
Yeah. So for the bulk of those, you're looking at the right-sided columns, those Gamma non-voting member booths, because not a whole lot of these guys are members of Gamma. And you're probably looking at that far right column because nobody's going to get their payment in by the 1st of September.
Okay.
So that's the space that you're looking
Surprised
at
they don't charge more for being in the front, but that's where most of the islands are too.
Yeah. So that 20 by 20 island, again, in the case of somebody like Academy that knows they're going to be back next year, they're making their deposit while they're at Origins this past year. So they're looking at $4,500 for that 20 by 20 island, and they would have had the deposit of half of that down before they left. So that your normal 10 by 10 booth, which, in the middle of an aisle somewhere, which is just a basic booth just to get in the door, you're looking at about $1,500. Yeah, that's not insignificant, right? That's not chump change. But
my hotel room costs almost that much too.
Yeah.
To be fair, so that's and the people vending have to be there till Sunday. So they're not leaving till at least Sunday night, plausibly Monday morning, if they're smart and able to do that. Yeah, they're probably getting there on Tuesday, frankly. So
yeah. Now the one thing that did piss a lot of people off this year, and Gary, I'm sure you saw it, that the back half of the exhibit hall, there were a ton of artist booths back there.
Yeah, that's been the case for several years, though.
Well,
there's usually been like a big artist zone.
They've had the artist alley the last couple of years where they were trying to sort of put a bunch of the artists in one area together. But this year there were noticeably more artist booths than before, in part because there were fewer game companies, but in part because the artist booth rate went down.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So, I mean, I don't feel like there were more artists this year than last year or possibly the year before. I mean, I didn't feel like there was. I did notice the big author section where there's a bunch of independent authors. They moved
the authors into more prominence in the exhibit hall. They pull them off the wall and kind of put them in a bigger island.
That's true. They were up back in the back corner.
But one of the other things that happened with the artist booths this year, and a couple of the vendors I talked to were kind of pissed off by it, is a bunch of the artists did not follow the published Origins guidelines of how tall they could build their booths up. And there were a bunch of them that were way violating the height requirements, which sort of made it a lot harder to find the booths in between them because they sort of felt like they were getting caved in.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I think I know some of the booths you're talking about. Watch my video, folks. But you also, I mean, mostly they were in the last back couple of rows too.
Yes,
so, I mean,
they were.
I don't know how seriously I want to take that problem, but
yeah, no, they intentionally put them along that one long back aisle to make that big artist alley out of it. But again, part of, and Gary, you probably noticed this. I haven't watched all your unboxing, your exhibit hall video, but I was there, right? I know what was there.
You saw it.
There were a lot of those middle class, mid-tier companies that were not there this year for various reasons. In some cases, a bunch of them were going to Gen Con because of the big 50th anniversary of D&D stuff that's going on. That's why Green Ronin wasn't at Origins, as I understand it. There were some folks that just had schedule conflicts come up, or other things going on in life. But once you added them all up, I mean, there were a good 35 or 40 companies that could have been there and have been at Origins in the recent past, right? Not MMP, who hadn't been there since like 2009 or whatever. But in the very recent past, there were a bunch of folks that were not there this year and could have been. And when you take those game companies out, you add back a bunch of the 3D printed tchotchke booths and a whole lot of dice booths, then it starts to look more like your regional arts festival and less like a game convention, which was a legitimate complaint about this year's exhibit hall. That's just sort of what it was this year.
Artie, we're 10 minutes over. I don't get paid for overtime.
That's true. We gotta wrap it up here, folks. So,
you know what I'm saying?
Hopefully everybody had a great time tonight. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but this was just delightful for me the entire time.
He belittled me all the time.
I didn't belittle you at all. It's all done out of love, Dan.
I'm talking about that guy.
Nothing but affection. Nothing but affection for Mr. Dan here. So, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Don't forget that we will be back next week with somebody on some topic or another, and there's all kinds of other stuff. If you're interested in maybe heading up a local convention, go check out the Armchair Dragoons website at armchairdragoons.com. They have a convention and event calendar where you can find the thing that is happening in your local area.
So that calendar at the moment is a little out of date because the dude that's going to be doing the updating for us is at Historicon right now.
Well, that's no excuse. Doesn't he have a laptop? Come on. Cavemen here. Wow, all right, folks. Man. We got to go. Everybody have a great night. We'll see y'all again soon.
Big move. Big. The moose is loose. Big moves. Big. The